They say the Nile never sleeps. Its waters remember every life that ever touched its shore. Even when the world turned to dust, the river kept its breath, calm, endless, ancient. Tonight, as the stars rise above the desert, you will drift beside that same eternal current, back to a time when the first villages dreamed of staying still. Let the wind of that old world move across your thoughts. Close your eyes. You are standing at the edge of the Nile. The air is warm and the night is waiting for you. The sun sinks beyond the dunes, leaving trails of molten light that fade into deep amber. The sky dims slowly, layer by layer, gold into violet, violet into blue, blue into darkness. And in that quiet descent, the Nile begins to breathe. Ripples shimmer like silk beneath the fading glow. Papyrus reeds lean toward the water, whispering in the evening wind. From the eastern bank, the smell of clay and smoke drifts lazily through the air. Somewhere a wooden oar strikes water. One single hollow sound, then silence again. A small settlement hums softly on the western shore. Women return from the fields with jars on their shoulders. Children run between mud brick huts, laughter faint in the distance. Dogs curl beside fires. Elders sit cross-legged in the glow, their voices low, telling stories of floods and seasons. The light of Ra has gone. Now only the fires remain, flickering like captured stars. Sparks dance upward and vanish into the sky, joining constellations older than memory. The smell of grain and river reeds hangs heavy and warm. At the edge of the water, an old fisherman sits motionless. His face glows in the firelight. His eyes are fixed on the current. He does not fish tonight, he only listens. The Nile speaks to him in low murmurs, telling him of days long past and of tomorrows yet to come. Across the water, temples rise like shadows, their stone faces lit faintly by torchlight. In one of them, a priest snuffs out the final flame of the day, murmuring a prayer that will drift through the air until dawn. And so Egypt sleeps. The wind moves through palm leaves like a soft hand. The stars reflect in the black surface of the river, each one trembling slightly, as if breathing with the earth. The old fisherman closes his eyes. He can still hear the river, steady, calm, ancient, and in that rhythm he feels the same peace that flows through everything alive. The Nile sleeps now. The village sleeps, and so may you. Breathe with the river, slowly, deeply. The story has just begun. The moon rises above the dunes, soft and white like a polished stone. Its light glides across the river and settles over the small village that sleeps beneath the palms. The air is thick with warmth and the faint taste of ash. Somewhere a jar tips over and rolls in the sand, and the sound carries like a whisper through the stillness. The Nile moves slowly, dark and wide, carrying 1,000 tiny reflections of the moon. The reeds on its edge sway, their shadows trembling on the surface. Frogs sing in rhythm, each note spaced far apart, as if the earth itself were breathing in its sleep. In one of the mud brick huts, a woman stirs the coals of the evening fire. The smoke rises in thin silver ribbons, curling around the low roof before finding its way out into the night. Beside her a child lies half asleep, the glow of the embers dancing across his face. The woman hums a quiet tune, older than the language she speaks, a melody passed through generations that no one remembers starting. Outside, the night presses close, warm and deep, wrapping the village like a blanket. Men return from the river carrying nets that shimmer faintly with the scales of fish. Their footsteps are soft, their voices lower than the hum of insects. They move like ghosts of the day, their bodies glowing with moonlight and sweat. One stops to look at the sky. The stars seem endless, so many that the darkness itself looks alive. He feels small but safe, as if every point of light were a guardian watching over his people. Near the edge of the village, an old clay pot leaks water drop by drop. Each sound echoes gently on the earth, blending with the quiet song of the frogs. The night is not silent. It breathes. Every sound, every shadow, moves in harmony with the river's steady rhythm. Farther away, the temple stands beneath the moon, its pillars carved with stories of gods and kings. The carvings catch the light, and for a moment they look alive. A priest, alone in the courtyard, kneels before an unlit flame. He whispers words of gratitude to the river that feeds their crops, to the wind that cools their homes, to the stars that guide their dreams. His prayer fades into the air, mingling with the sigh of the water and the murmur of trees. The village sleeps deeply now. Fires dim to red embers. The night stretches wide, still and endless. The fisherman from the riverbank lies beside his boat, his hand resting on the wet sand. He dreams of the current carrying him downstream to places unseen. In his sleep, the river hums softly, the same tune that the woman sang, the same rhythm that the earth has known forever. The Nile does not rest, but it forgives. It moves in silence, holding the dreams of the living and the dead alike. And under the pale, patient moon, Egypt breathes with it, slow, calm, eternal. The night deepens, and the world grows softer. A thin mist rises from the water, curling around the trunks of the palm trees and drifting into the narrow paths between homes. The air carries a cool hush, a kind of gentle weight that presses all things toward stillness. Only the faint crackle of the dying fires and the whisper of the wind remain to mark the passage of time. The river glows faintly, holding the moon inside its long dark mirror. Every ripple seems deliberate, a small movement in an ancient ritual of calm. The reeds sway, and their rustle sounds almost like speech, low, rhythmic, comforting. Near the village center, a young man tends the last of the coals. His face flickers with orange light as he adds dry twigs, coaxing one final flame before sleep. Behind him, shadows move on the clay wall, the dance of fire and wind, brief and fragile. He sits for a while, listening to the distant rhythm of frogs and the soft creak of wooden boats rocking in the current. He feels the weight of the day leaving his body. His eyes close, and in that moment between waking and dream, he imagines he can hear the Nile speaking, slow, melodic, like breath made visible. A voice older than thought, whispering of rain, of hunger, of birth. On the far side of the river, the desert waits in perfect silence. Dunes gleam silver under the moonlight, their edges sharp and clean as if carved by a steady hand. Sometimes a breeze moves the sand, reshaping the hills grain by grain. No sound follows, only motion, subtle and endless. A jackal calls in the distance, and the echo fades like smoke. Back in the village, the people sleep in clusters, their bodies turned toward one another, their hearts beating in the same rhythm as the river's pulse. The woman who sang now dreams of water filling the fields, of green shoots piercing the soil. The fisherman dreams of the first light of morning touching the boats. The priest dreams of stars descending, their voices whispering the names of forgotten gods. Each dream drifts into another, mingling like currents beneath the surface. The river keeps them all. It carries every dream, every whisper, every unspoken hope. The water moves gently past roots and reeds, through bends and shadows, around sleeping boats and resting fish. The Nile knows the measure of time, though it never counts. It knows the shape of every season, though it never asks for change. In its slow and patient motion lies the secret of all rest. The moon begins its slow descent, touching the horizon with pale silver fire. Soon dawn will come, but for now, the world belongs to the river. It moves through Egypt like breath through a body, steady, calm, alive. The old man stirs, opens his eyes once more and smiles at the sound of the current. He knows the water will still be moving when he is gone. He lies back, sighs once, and lets the sound of the river carry him back into sleep. Morning begins as a whisper long before the sun appears. The air above the Nile turns pale gray, carrying the scent of damp earth and reeds. A cool mist drifts across the river's surface, softening the line between water and sky. Birds stir in the distance, their wings brushing the dawn. The first sound is not of voices, but of the river itself, its deep, unbroken murmur beneath the waking world. In the village, shadows of huts stretch thin in the half-light. A woman rises before the others. She steps outside, her bare feet touching the cool sand, and listens. The world feels new, untouched. She kneels beside a clay jar and dips it into the water. Ripples glide outward, widening until they vanish into the current. The surface glows faintly like polished bronze. When she lifts the jar, droplets fall back into the river with tiny, perfect sounds. Behind her, the first smoke of the morning fires rises. Men untie small boats from their posts. Their hands move slowly, practiced from years of rhythm and repetition. They push away from shore, the wood creaking softly under their weight. Each oar stroke catches the light of dawn as if painting the river with silver. They do not speak. They know the river understands silence better than words. Children stir inside the huts. A young boy sits up and rubs his eyes. He watches a shaft of sunlight crawl through the small opening in the wall, landing on the floor like a golden thread. He smiles without knowing why. Outside, the woman hums the same lullaby she sang the night before, but slower now, as if the melody itself is waking. Farther down the bank, the old fisherman stands again beside his boat. His back bends with years, but his eyes are steady. He feels the warmth growing on his skin and nods to the water. The Nile has kept its promise. It flows exactly as it did yesterday and 1,000 yesterdays before that. He lowers his net into the current, his movements quiet and sure. Across the river, the desert glows faintly pink. The dunes shimmer in thin lines of heat, though the sun has barely risen. The temple walls catch the first light. Carved figures of gods and kings seem to breathe again. A priest steps into the open air, his robe moving softly in the wind. He faces the east, lifts both hands, and whispers a prayer to Ra, the sun reborn. The light grows behind him, spilling gold across stone, sand, and river alike. The village stirs fully now. Voices begin to rise. Soft greetings, the clink of clay pots, the gentle thud of grain poured into baskets. The sound of life returns, not loud but constant, blending with the low hum of the water. The river reflects everything. The movement of people, the glint of sunlight, the passing of clouds. Soon the warmth spreads through the air. The mist fades. The first day of another cycle begins, calm and unchanged. The Nile continues its endless song, carrying with it the memory of night, the breath of dreams, and the promise of rest to come again. The day unfolds like a long breath, quiet and certain. The sun climbs higher, pulling the mist away from the river until the water shines like glass. Every surface glows, the thatched roofs, the clay walls, the polished leaves of palm trees. The air hums softly with insects, a slow pulse that seems to echo the rhythm of the Nile. People move gently, never rushing. Life here is measured not by hours but by light and shadow. A woman grinds grain with a stone, her movement steady and circular. Each sound of stone against grain joins the heartbeat of the village. Near her a child shapes wet clay into small figures of birds. His hands are brown with mud, his eyes half closed with concentration. He hums to himself, a simple tune without beginning or end. By the shore, the men pull their boats to shallow water and empty their nets. Silver fish flash once in the sunlight before falling still. The air fills with the scent of salt and river moss. They speak in low tones, sharing the day's catch, their voices thick with calm. There is no argument, no hurry, only the rhythm of work done together. Farther inland, smoke rises from a single kiln. A potter sits before it, shaping the earth into form. His fingers trace smooth lines, turning the clay until it becomes something more than soil. The fire glows orange inside the dark pit, its light flickering over his arms. Every vessel he makes carries the touch of the river, the same water mixed with dust to form life and craft. In the distance, the temple bells sound once, a low metallic hum that fades into the heat. The priest walks the courtyard, his shadow sharp against the stone. He pours water on the ground, a gesture to bless the soil that feeds the people. He knows the Nile is the only god that never sleeps. Its flow is prayer enough. As the sun nears its highest point, the villagers retreat into shade. Some rest inside their homes, lying on woven mats, listening to the quiet drone of the day. Others sit beneath palm trees, their eyes following the slow drift of clouds. The air is heavy but kind. Even the animals rest, the donkeys with their heads bowed, the birds perched silently among the reeds. The old fisherman has returned to shore. He sits by his boat mending a net, his fingers quick but relaxed. A boy watches him, learning without words. They share a skin of water, passing it back and forth. Behind them the river glitters fiercely, bright enough to hurt the eyes. Yet beneath that brightness lies coolness, the deep, slow current moving unseen. Time softens. The afternoon passes as if wrapped in a dream. The sun slides lower, painting everything in gold and dust. The river darkens again, its face turning from mirror to shadow. Soon the fires will be lit, the voices will grow softer, and the day will surrender itself to evening. The fisherman looks across the water and smiles. He knows this pattern, the breathing of earth and sky. It has never failed. The Nile gives, the Nile takes, and between the two there is peace. He leans back against the boat, closes his eyes, and listens as the river begins to whisper again, calling the world toward night. Evening drifts in with no announcement. The golden light fades from the roofs and settles into soft amber across the sand. Shadows lengthen, stretching from every tree and hut until they touch the edge of the river. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of grain and smoke. The Nile changes color again, from bright reflection to deep, glassy calm. Each ripple catches the last of the sun, holding it for a heartbeat before letting it sink into dusk. The people begin to move slower, their voices quieter now. Children are called home from the edge of the fields, their laughter breaking and softening as they obey. Women finish their work, stacking pots and baskets beside the doorways. The rhythmic sound of grinding stones fades, replaced by the low crackle of fire. In the temple, a bell rings once, a single note that hums through the air like a sigh. The first fires of night are lit. Smoke rises in thin streams, twisting through the soft blue evening sky. Sparks drift upward, vanishing into the growing darkness. Near the water, a group of men sit in a circle, mending nets and speaking softly. Their hands move by habit, practiced and patient. Every gesture has meaning. The tie of a knot, the passing of a tool. The look shared between old friends who have seen the same river through decades of flood and drought. An old woman walks among the huts with a clay lamp in her hand. The flame inside trembles in the wind, painting orange light across the ground. She places it outside each doorway, one by one, until the village glows like a constellation along the shore. The reflections of those small fires dance on the surface of the Nile, shimmering in long streaks of gold. Somewhere a flute begins to play, a low, wandering tune that drifts with the wind. It's not a song of joy or sadness. It's simply the sound of being alive. The melody moves between the huts, blending with the night insects and the whisper of the reeds. The villagers listen without speaking. For them, this is the sound of home. Farther down the river, the old fisherman pushes his small boat into the shallows. The water is warm against his skin as he wades in. He climbs aboard and lets the current carry him. The boat drifts past the glowing village, past the reeds that bend in slow rhythm, past the faint outline of the temple rising in the distance. He says nothing. His oar rests across his knees. The river itself will guide him. Above, the stars appear one by one, piercing through the last veil of twilight. They scatter across the sky in familiar patterns. The hunter, the bird, the great river of heaven that mirrors the one below. The fisherman tilts his head back and breathes deeply. The night smells of water, of fire, of the quiet persistence of life. On the bank, the lamps burn steady. The flute fades. The village is still again. The only motion left is the river, endless and patient, carrying its reflections into the horizon. The fisherman closes his eyes and lets his body rock with the flow. The world exhales, and with it all things begin to rest once more. Night settles over the land like a slow-moving tide. The sky deepens to a blue so dark it seems endless, pierced only by the shimmer of stars reflected in the Nile's quiet skin. The air cools further, tasting faintly of smoke and wet clay. Every sound grows softer, drawn inward. The call of birds ceases, footsteps fade, and the village breathes in one long collective sigh. The fires burn lower, their light now a gentle pulse on the sand. The huts glow faintly from within, each doorway marked by the dim flicker of an oil lamp. Inside, families lie close together, their bodies curved in the same direction, their dreams aligned with the rhythm of the water outside. Children sleep first. their small hands still smelling of clay and earth. Parents whisper until even their voices dissolve into the steady hush of night. At the riverbank, the old fisherman's boat drifts along the current. The oar rests against the side, unmoving. His head tilts back, eyes half open, watching the stars as they ripple in the water below. The boat creaks softly, the sound blending with the hum of insects and the quiet splash of a fish turning beneath the surface. Every motion feels ancient, inevitable, as though the world itself is remembering how to breathe. Across the river, the dunes gleam faintly silver. The desert sleeps but never truly rests. It shifts grain by grain, whispering to the wind in a voice too low for men to hear. The stars above it blaze without heat, steady and patient. Somewhere beyond those sands lies another village, another fire, another set of voices falling into silence. The same river binds them all, carrying their reflections like messages that never need words. In the temple courtyard, the priest kneels before the dark altar. The torches around him have burned down to their final embers, glowing like the eyes of waiting gods. He places both palms on the stone and bows his head. His prayer is not spoken aloud. It is a quiet thought of gratitude, a thank you for water, for grain, for rest. He stays like that for a long time until the last ember fades and only the moonlight remains. Back in the village, the night deepens into perfect stillness. The old woman who lit the lamps earlier now moves through the paths again. She cups each flame and snuffs it out gently with her hand. One by one the lights vanish, leaving only darkness and the faint hum of the river. Her face glows briefly as she pauses to look at the water, then she turns and disappears into her home. The fisherman's boat drifts farther downstream, where reeds grow thick and the current slows. He closes his eyes completely now, surrendering to the soft movement. The boat rocks, the stars above seem to drift with him, and the Nile hums its eternal lullaby, a song without words, older than any tongue. The land sleeps, the river sleeps, and within that vast breathing silence everything is safe. Every ripple, every sigh, every grain of sand belongs to the same dream. The dream of a world at peace beneath the endless Egyptian night. The hours after midnight belong to the river alone. The wind grows thin and gentle, moving like a hand through the tall reeds. The air is heavy with cool moisture, and the sound of insects becomes the only pulse that marks time. The moon has passed its highest point. Now its light falls sideways across the water, long and silver, casting deep shadows on the sand. The Nile moves without hurry, every wave folding over the next like the slow breath of a sleeping creature. At the edge of the village, the fires are gone, leaving faint spirals of smoke that fade into the sky. A dog stirs, turns twice in the dust and lies down again. From inside the huts come the sounds of dreaming, small sighs, the creak of a bed, the soft murmur of someone speaking in sleep. The night has grown so quiet that even the river seems to lower its voice. Out on the water, the fisherman's boat floats between two worlds, not fully in darkness, not yet touched by dawn. He dreams of walking along the river's edge in daylight, of hearing the rush of floodwaters returning after a long dry season. In his dream, the fish leap bright as coins, and the fields stretch wide and green. The dream feels so real that he doesn't notice the boat turning slowly in the current, its bow facing back toward the village. Across the water, the desert breathes. Fine sand drifts like mist across the dunes, hissing faintly as it moves. The air there smells of stone and memory. If anyone stood upon those hills, they would see the Nile glimmering below like a ribbon of light, an unbroken line that carries the memory of every generation that has ever looked upon it. The priest in the temple sleeps at last, his head resting against the cold stone of the altar. The statues above him watch in silence, their faces carved to resemble calm. In the darkness between the columns, a single torch still burns, its flame thin but steady. The glow reaches only as far as the nearest wall, where carvings of the gods shimmer faintly. They seem alive in the light, shifting as the flame bends and straightens, as if they too are breathing. The river keeps its slow course. It does not rush or falter. It moves as it always has, patient, enduring, eternal. The reeds bend as the current slides past, their tips brushing the surface in small arcs. Fish move beneath the water unseen, guided by senses older than the stars. The world is held together by these quiet things, by the pulse of the current, by the promise of another morning. And somewhere in the heart of that silence, the first hint of dawn begins to gather. It is not light yet, only the faintest change in color at the edge of the sky, where the darkness softens to a deep gray blue. The wind stirs once more, carrying the smell of wet earth and distant fire. The fisherman sighs in his sleep, as if he too can feel the coming of the day. The boat drifts closer to shore. The river hums its endless song, gentle and slow, carrying dreams toward the waiting light. The faint edge of dawn grows broader across the horizon, a pale band between sky and earth. The stars begin to fade one by one, dissolving into the coming light. The Nile turns from silver to soft gray, and its long reflection of the moon disappears beneath the surface. The air cools for a brief moment before the heat of day begins again. The world seems to hold its breath in that pause between darkness and morning. From inside the huts, the first sounds of waking stir the air. A child coughs softly. A door opens. The low murmur of a woman's voice calls a name. Smoke begins to rise again, thin and blue, curling through the openings of the roofs. The smell of wet clay and ash returns. The old woman steps outside, stretching her arms toward the faint light. Her lamp has burned out, but the habit remains. She looks toward the river and bows her head in quiet greeting. The fisherman wakes as the boat touches the bank. He blinks into the soft gray light and smiles faintly. The night has carried him home. He steps out, his feet sinking into cool mud, and ties the rope to a wooden stake. Behind him the water murmurs in low tones, as if speaking to itself. He crouches, cups his hands, and splashes his face. The chill of the Nile feels like life returning. He sits on the sand for a while, watching the horizon grow brighter. Far away, the temple stands bathed in the first touch of dawn. The priest wakes with the birds, his body stiff from stone. He opens his eyes to see the carvings glowing faintly, every line of the gods illuminated by a golden edge of sun. He lights a new torch from the coals of the old and raises it high. The flame flickers once, twice, then steadies. A prayer leaves his lips, not spoken loudly but carried inward, where the gods live in silence. The village wakes fully now. The men gather near the boats, their laughter low but bright. The women stir grain into clay pots, adding water until it glistens. The children chase one another in the sand, their feet leaving brief marks that the wind soon erases. Life begins again exactly as it did the day before, but each gesture feels renewed. Nothing here is rushed. Even the beginning of work is a kind of peace. The old fisherman walks through the village, nodding to each face he passes. He smells bread baking and hears the sound of grinding stones. Every sound feels familiar, as if the day itself were an old friend. He pauses by the water and watches the reflection of the sky shift from grey to soft gold. The river gleams calm and complete. Behind him voices rise in greeting. The sun crests the horizon, flooding the world with light. The river shimmers as though dusted with glass. Birds wheel above, their wings catching the new color of the morning. The old man closes his eyes, feeling the warmth reach his skin. The Nile moves beside him, steady and eternal, as it always has and always will. In that moment, the distance between life and dream vanishes. The night is gone, the river still sings, and Egypt wakes once more into its endless gentle day. By mid-morning, the village hums with quiet work. The sun climbs higher, pouring light over the flat roofs and the slow-moving river. The Nile has turned to gold again, wide and calm, its ripples stretching far into the horizon. The air trembles faintly with heat, yet the rhythm of life continues unbroken. The day feels ancient, as if time itself moves in circles rather than lines. A group of men stand near the fields beyond the village, their bodies outlined by the shimmer of light. They carry baskets of seed, tossing handfuls into the dark soil left damp by the river's retreat. Each gesture is slow, deliberate. When the wind passes, the seeds scatter further, falling where they will. The men pause often to rest, leaning on their wooden staffs, watching the water glint. One of them hums a short melody, a tune meant to keep pace with their movement. It drifts through the air and fades into the sound of insects. Back near the huts, women knead dough in large clay bowls. The scent of grain and smoke fills the warm air. The children help as best they can, bringing handfuls of straw for the fires, laughing when the wind carries flour onto their faces. The laughter ripples through the village and seems to reach the river itself. The Nile answers only with a shimmer, its surface glowing like polished stone. At the edge of the village, the old fisherman sits beneath a palm tree. His net lies beside him, still damp from morning. He watches the movement of the people and the slow pulse of the river. There is nothing new to see, yet every detail holds weight. The bend of a reed, the glint of a fishtail, the arc of a hawk circling far above. He understands that the world never truly changes. It only turns quietly through its own endless rhythm. The priest walks down from the temple to the river bank, robes fluttering in the light breeze. He stops beside the fisherman, and for a while neither speaks. The two men watch the water together, listening to its murmur. Then the priest says softly, "The river gives more than it takes." The fisherman nods but does not reply. They both know the truth of it. They stand in silence until the priest turns to go, his sandals leaving shallow prints in the sand. As the day grows hotter, most retreat into shade. The hum of activity softens into stillness. Only the sound of the river remains constant. Its movement is so smooth that it seems motionless, like a mirror laid across the earth. The smell of warm mud and drying reeds fills the air. The wind shifts slightly, carrying the sound of distant birds and the faint crackle of fire. The old man closes his eyes, letting the light play across his face. He remembers nights of flood, when the river rose high enough to reach the doorsteps. He remembers years of drought, when the soil cracked and fish vanished. Yet through it all, the Nile endured, always giving, always returning, never angry, never kind, simply eternal. He breathes deeply, the way the river does. Somewhere far upstream, thunder murmurs, a promise of rain. The sound reaches faintly through the warm air. The old man smiles. The water will rise again, the soil will darken, and the rhythm will continue. Around him, the world hums softly, as if repeating his thought. The Nile glows brighter, carrying sunlight and silence together, unending, unchanged. By midday, the air shivers with heat. The light over the Nile bends and wavers. The surface of the water blurs until the far bank looks like a mirage. The fields shimmer under a white sky and the hum of insects grows louder, a steady drone that fills every corner of the valley. The people of the village slow their movements to match the rhythm of the day. They know the pattern well. Work early, rest while the sun rules, rise again when the shadows lengthen. Inside the huts, the light falls through cracks in the roof like threads of fire. The women lie beside the ovens, their hands resting on clay jars that still radiate warmth. Children sleep sprawled across the cool floor, the sound of their breathing matching the low rush of the river outside. From time to time, a soft gust of wind passes through, carrying with it the smell of wet reeds and grain. It cools the skin and leaves behind a faint trace of salt. Out by the fields, a single man keeps watch over the cattle. He sits on a low mound, his staff planted in the soil. The animals barely move, standing in the shade of acacia trees, their sides glistening with sweat. The man hums to them, not to call or command, but to keep them company. His song drifts across the grass, a quiet vibration that merges with the hum of the day. It is a sound as old as breath. At the riverbank, the fisherman rinses his net in shallow water. The sunlight turns each droplet into glass. He spreads the net on a flat stone to dry, then sits beside it, bare feet in the current. Small fish dart between his toes. The water feels alive, moving around him like something that can think. He dips his hand in and watches the ripples spread outward, catching fragments of light. Each ripple stretches farther than the last until it touches the reflection of the sky. The priest returns from the temple carrying a bowl of cool water. He kneels beside the old man and pours a little into the sand, letting it sink and vanish. "For the river," he says simply. The fisherman nods, his eyes fixed on the horizon. In the distance, a thin grey line of cloud has formed above the desert. It is a rare sight, and even the air seems to pause in recognition. Afternoon arrives without movement. The heat presses down, and the village becomes a painting of stillness. The cattle stand unmoving, the reeds no longer sway, even the insects slow their hum. Only the Nile continues its quiet motion, dark and unbroken, sliding between the banks like time itself. The old man leans back against the palm tree and closes his eyes. He imagines the river as a great heart beating beneath the land, its pulse reaching every living thing. The sound of it fills his mind until it becomes the only sound in the world. In that stillness, he feels the weight of centuries pressing close, the lives lived beside this same water, the hands that shaped the same clay, the eyes that watched the same horizon. The world changes, yet the river remains. The fisherman breathes in the hot air and exhales slowly, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the current. Far above, a single hawk turns in the white sky, its shadow gliding soundlessly across the sleeping earth. As the sun begins its slow descent, the heat loosens its grip on the valley. Shadows stretch long and thin across the sand, reaching toward the water. The color of the Nile changes once more, from molten gold to a deeper, quieter hue, like polished bronze beneath the fading light. The wind stirs again, carrying with it the faint rustle of palm leaves and the distant call of a heron returning to its nest. The world begins to breathe after the long stillness of the afternoon. From the fields, the workers return in a slow line, their baskets half full with reeds and grain. Their feet leave shallow prints in the soft soil, erased almost immediately by the breeze. The sound of their voices rises gently, short words, small laughter, nothing hurried or loud. They are tired, but the kind of tired that comes with peace. In the village, the fires are being lit again. Thin ribbons of smoke rise and twist upward, turning pink in the sunset. The smell of roasting bread drifts through the air, mingling with the damp scent of the river. Children wake from their afternoon sleep and step outside, blinking at the light. They chase one another through the sand, their laughter bouncing between the huts like the echo of a song. Near the riverbank, the old fisherman stands once more beside his boat. The wood glows warm under his hands. He pushes it into the shallows, watching as the water curls around the hull. His reflection stretches long and broken across the surface, merging with the darkening ripples. He doesn't row this time. He simply sits and lets the current move him slowly downstream, the sound of the oar against the boat, the soft splash of water, the low cry of birds, all blend into one seamless rhythm. The fisherman listens to it as though the river itself is singing. The world seems to have narrowed to three things: the water, the air, and the fading light. He feels small within it, but not lost, only part of something endless and kind. At the temple, the priest lights new torches along the wall. The flame dances on the carvings, turning stone into shadow and shadow into gold. He stands in the doorway and looks out toward the river, where the boat drifts like a dark leaf against the glowing water. He raises his hand, not as a gesture of blessing, but as recognition. One life saluting another under the same eternal sky. As the sun sinks lower, its last light floods the horizon with color, red, orange, violet, then blue. The dunes turn purple in the distance, the palms black against the sky. The first star appears above the temple roof, trembling faintly. One by one the others follow, until the night sky becomes a field of quiet fire. The fisherman lets his hand trail in the water, feeling the coolness slide across his skin. The current pulls him gently. He doesn't resist. The stars reflect in the river, making it seem as though he floats through the sky itself. The air grows cooler. The village lights dim behind him, and the sound of the day disappears completely. The Nile hums softly under the stars, carrying the last warmth of sunlight away. The old man breathes slowly, his eyes half closed, his thoughts sinking like stones beneath the surface. The world around him is silent, vast and full of sleep. Night rises again, slow and deliberate, as if the sky itself is exhaling. The last glow of the sun fades behind the dunes, leaving only a faint orange line that melts into deep blue. The air cools, the insects return to their patient rhythm, and the smell of wet earth thickens near the water. The Nile glistens like a black ribbon, its surface broken only by soft ripples that catch the starlight and scatter it. The village begins to quiet once more. The fires burn lower, their flames small and steady. Women finish their evening chores, pouring water into jars, stacking the clay bowls, sweeping the sand smooth outside their doors. Men sit in silence, watching the river, saying little. The weight of the day has lifted, and a calm heaviness takes its place, a peace that belongs only to night. Inside one of the huts, a mother hums as her child drifts into sleep. Her song has no words. It is the same tune her mother once sang, and the one before that. It rises and falls with the sound of the river outside, blending so completely that it becomes part of the world's pulse. The child's breathing slows. The mother's eyes close. The song fades into the darkness. The old fisherman returns from the river. He drags his boat halfway onto the shore and ties it loosely to a wooden stake. The sand crunches under his bare feet. He looks at the sky, the moon now thin and high, the stars sharp and clear. He can name many of them, not from learning, but from memory. They have watched him all his life. They have watched every life before his. He nods once to them before sitting down beside his boat. From across the water, the temple glows faintly. Its torches flicker, sending small reflections trembling across the surface. The priest stands in the doorway again, whispering a final prayer before extinguishing the last flame. The smoke rises straight into the air and vanishes into the night. Silence takes its place, a silence so deep it feels alive. The fisherman listens to that silence. It is not emptiness but fullness, the sound of everything resting, breathing, being. He hears the reeds shifting in the wind, the slow lap of water against the shore, the faint sigh of a sleeping village. He feels the earth cool beneath him and the pull of the river against the sand. He lies down beside the boat, folding his arms under his head. The stars turn above him in slow procession. The breeze brushes his face. He can still smell the day. The warmth of grain, the sweetness of smoke, the faint salt of the water. His eyes grow heavy, but his mind drifts far beyond the bank, following the current southward through endless night. The Nile moves on, carrying the breath of the living and the dreams of the sleeping alike. It passes villages, temples, and deserts, gathering stories without keeping them. Each ripple holds a reflection of the stars and lets it go again. The fisherman exhales, slow and deep. Around him the world is perfectly still. The river hums softly beside him, ancient and endless. Somewhere far away, a bird calls once and is silent. The night folds itself over the land like a blanket. Egypt sleeps and the Nile, eternal and unhurried, keeps watch. Dawn hides for a long time before it finally shows its face again. The sky changes so slowly that at first it is impossible to tell if the darkness is lifting or only shifting. A faint light rises behind the dunes, gray and thin, touching the edges of the palms, the roofs of huts, and the silent river. The Nile seems to wake first. Its surface grows pale and glassy, gathering the first reflection of morning. A mist drifts over it, low and calm, as if the water itself exhales. The fisherman stirs beside his boat. His body aches from sleep on the sand, but the sound of the river comforts him. He sits up, rubbing his eyes, watching as the world regains color. The stars fade. The horizon opens like a lid removed from a jar. Birds begin their calls one after another. Slow, uncertain, then sure. Each sound breaks the night a little more. In the village, smoke rises from the first morning fires. A woman steps outside, wrapping a thin cloth around her shoulders. She kneels beside a jar to fill it with water, her reflection trembling in the surface. The chill of dawn moves across her skin, but she smiles at the feel of it. Behind her, a child laughs in his sleep, and the sound blends with the whisper of the wind. The air carries a cool sweetness now, washed clean by night. The huts gleam faintly with dew. The smell of wet clay and grain returns, mixing with the faint scent of ash from last night's fires. The people begin to move again, slow at first, stretching, murmuring, their voices soft as the light. From the temple hill, the priest appears, his robe catching the new brightness. He walks toward the river carrying a small bowl. The old fisherman rises to meet him, and the two stand silently for a moment. The priest dips his fingers into the bowl and lets the water fall back into the Nile. The ripples widen and vanish. The river remembers, he says. The fisherman nods, his eyes following the current. It always does. The first full ray of sunlight breaks over the horizon, scattering gold across the water. The mist lifts and turns to steam. The world glows, sand, palm, stone, and river, each alive in its own stillness. The people stop for a moment to look. Even the children pause, caught by the shimmer. The day feels like a gift unwrapped slowly, light spilling into every crack and shadow. The fisherman pushes his boat again into the water. The wood creaks, the current takes hold, and he begins to row. Each stroke feels easy, guided more by instinct than strength. The priest watches until the boat is small, then turns back toward the village. His shadow long and thin behind him. The river moves on, glistening beneath the sun, carrying the echoes of night and the promise of another evening to come. The fisherman hums as he rows, the same melody the wind sings through the reeds. The sound is quiet, steady and without end, like the Nile itself, old and eternal, whispering peace to all who live by its side. By late morning, the village is alive again. Sunlight pours down across the fields, glinting off the wet leaves and the narrow channels carved by the water. The Nile glows a brilliant gold beneath the sky, its slow ripples gleaming like moving glass. The air vibrates faintly with the hum of insects and the distant rhythm of tools striking soil. Every sound feels woven together. Wind through reeds, wooden wheels turning, quiet human breath. The old fisherman moves along the water's edge, carrying his net across his shoulder. The sand is warm now beneath his bare feet. Each step presses a mark that fills quickly as the breeze passes. He pauses to look across the river where another village stands faint in the haze, its roofs shining in the sun. He knows the people there live the same way, rise with the light, labor with the day, rest with the dusk. The river connects them as blood connects the body, unseen but certain. Children play near the shallows, chasing one another between the reeds. Their laughter skips over the water, and small waves follow their feet. One boy picks up a smooth, flat stone and throws it across the surface. It skips 4 times before sinking. They cheer, their voices bright against the vast quiet. A heron startles and lifts from the bank, its wings flashing white as it rises into the blue. Farther inland, the women spread fresh grain on woven mats to dry. They speak softly, their words carried away by the wind. One begins a low tune, a work song as old as the fields themselves. The rhythm guides their hands, keeps the work from feeling heavy. Each gesture is a prayer in motion. The priest walks among them, checking the clay jars that store the previous harvest. He touches each one as if greeting an old friend. The grain shifts softly inside, whispering against the walls. He murmurs a blessing, not loud, but enough for the sound to join the rest of the day's harmony. As the sun reaches its highest point, the heat presses down again. The fisherman has already returned from the river with his morning catch. He lays the fish upon a flat stone, the scales shining silver in the light. A young boy runs to help him. Together they clean the nets, stretching them between stakes so that the breeze may dry them. The boy listens as the old man speaks, his voice rough but steady. The river gives when it is calm, he says, but never demand from it. Ask quietly and it will answer. The boy nods, though he doesn't fully understand. The lesson sinks deeper than words can go. The afternoon drifts by in long, slow waves. The river barely seems to move, its surface unbroken except for the occasional flash of a fish or the curl of a breeze. The people rest in shade, their eyes half closed. Time loses its edges here. It stretches like the river, wide and endless. High above, clouds form like faint brush strokes, their shadows moving lazily over the dunes. The priest looks up, reading them the way others read scripture. He knows rain is distant but coming. The Nile will rise again. The land will drink. Life will continue. He closes his eyes, hearing only the water's murmur. The same steady sound that carries through all the ages, quiet and eternal, holding the memory of every dawn that has ever been. By afternoon the light softens again. The glare of midday fades into a pale honey-colored calm. The shadows of the palms grow long across the ground, touching the walls of the huts and reaching toward the river. The Nile itself glows deeper now, no longer gold but amber, its surface slow and wide. The wind has changed. It carries the scent of grain drying in the sun and a faint trace of smoke from distant fires. The sound of work is softer, like a lullaby for the earth. The fisherman sits near the water, his knees drawn close to his chest. His catch is done for the day. His nets hang to dry, shimmering like spider silk. Around him the world hums in low tones, the call of doves from the trees, the murmur of the water, the soft scrape of sand shifting beneath his hands. He feels the rhythm of it all, steady and certain, the same as it has always been. Children return from the shallows, their skin shining with water and sun. They sit near the huts playing with pebbles and reeds, their laughter small and distant. The women call them quietly, their voices gentle but firm. The smell of cooking grain thickens in the air, sweet and heavy. Somewhere a pot rattles, somewhere a door creaks, somewhere a voice hums the same tune as last night. The priest stands on the temple steps, his face turned toward the western sky. The sun rests just above the dunes, a vast circle of fire reflected in the river. He spreads his hands, palms upward, the gesture slow and graceful. His lips move without sound. The light burns around him, turning the carved stone behind him to living gold. For a moment the world seems to pause in reverence. Then the spell breaks. A cool wind moves across the valley, lifting dust from the ground. The reeds bow, the fires tremble, the air tastes suddenly new. The fisherman watches the ripples push outward in widening rings. He smiles faintly, knowing this moment, this breath between day and night, is when the river feels most alive. The people begin to gather near the water. It is a habit older than memory. They come not to speak or pray, but simply to sit and watch. The children chase shadows on the sand. The women dip jars to fill them with evening water. The men sit with their feet in the current, letting the chill rise into their legs. No one rushes. The sound of the water replaces speech. The sun lowers itself into the horizon, slow and patient. Its reflection stretches across the Nile in a single beam of molten light that reaches from bank to bank. The entire world glows. Faces, water, clay, stone, all touched by the same warmth. For a few breaths, time feels weightless. The fisherman closes his eyes. The light behind his eyelids is red and soft, like the heart of a flame. When he opens them again, the sun is gone. The sky turns indigo, then deep blue. The first stars appear, trembling in the darkening river. The people rise one by one, returning to their homes. Fires are lit. The smell of smoke and bread drifts through the air again. Night begins its slow return, gentle as a sigh. The old man remains by the water. He watches the stars settle into their places, their reflections flickering in the current. The world has turned once more, and the Nile has carried another day into memory. He lies back on the sand, feeling the earth's quiet breath beneath him. The river murmurs beside him, ancient, endless and kind. The sky deepens into velvet blue, the last trace of twilight vanishing beyond the dunes. The first cool wind of evening slides down from the desert, rippling through the reeds and across the still surface of the Nile. The water takes on the color of ink, broken only by scattered stars and the dim reflection of firelight along the shore. The world is quiet again, but not empty, alive with small sounds that seem to breathe in rhythm, the hiss of sand shifting, the murmur of distant animals, the faint creak of wooden boats moored in the shallows. The fisherman remains seated by the water, the warmth of the sand fading beneath him. He listens to the world rearrange itself for night. Behind him the village begins to settle, the soft clang of pottery being stacked, the rustle of straw mats unrolled, the low tone of voices blending into one calm hum. A woman laughs once, short and bright, and the sound carries across the river before dissolving into the dark. At the temple, torches flicker again to life. The priest moves through the courtyard in slow steps, trailing a faint scent of resin and smoke. He stops before the carved doorway, where the shadow of a falcon god stretches long across the wall. Bowing his head, he lights the central flame that will burn until dawn. Its glow spills over the stone and shivers in the moving air. The light touches the river, casting a trembling path of gold that reaches almost to the fisherman's feet. He gazes at it for a long time. The reflection bends and twists with the current, vanishing, returning, breaking apart, reforming, just like the flow of his own life, uncounted days folding into one another. He remembers the sound of the river when he was a child, how it sang louder after a storm. He remembers his father's hands tying the same kind of knots in the same kind of nets. He remembers nights when the stars were so clear that the river seemed to mirror the heavens perfectly. Everything different, yet nothing truly changed. The night grows cooler. The air smells faintly of ash and water. Crickets begin their slow chorus. From somewhere inland, a cow lows once, its voice echoing softly. The fisherman stretches out beside his boat, resting his head against the wood. The river laps gently against the shore. He lets the sound fill him. There are no thoughts now, only rhythm, breath, water, wind. Far across the water, the faint glow of another settlement flickers. Their fires look like stars resting on the earth. Between them and this village lies only darkness and the patient eternal river. The fisherman wonders, half awake, if someone there is also sitting by the water, looking this way, breathing the same night air. The thought comforts him. The priest extinguishes one of the outer torches, leaving only the flame at the altar. Its light steadies, small but sure. He turns toward the river, whispers something too soft to hear, and walks back into shadow. The fisherman closes his eyes. The warmth of the day lingers faintly on his skin. Above him, constellations turn in slow silence. The river hums beside him, steady as a heartbeat. The world is whole, complete and still. In that stillness he drifts, his breath matching the water's flow, his dreams carrying him downstream into darkness and calm. The deep of night has returned, heavy and vast. The world seems suspended between two breaths, one belonging to the river, the other to the sky. The stars gleam sharp and cold above, mirrored perfectly in the black skin of the Nile. Between those twin infinities, the land rests, hushed and timeless. The wind has gone still. Even the reeds do not move. The old fisherman dreams. He dreams of light dancing on water, of floods that once rose higher than memory, of children running along the banks long ago. He dreams of the river not as water but as a living thing, a long shining creature breathing beneath the land, its pulse older than mountains. In his dream, the Nile whispers to him in a voice like wind through stone. "I remember every name," it says, "even the ones no one speaks anymore." In the village, the fires have dimmed to faint red hearts. The air smells of cooled ash and sleeping earth. A dog shifts beside a doorway, its eyes half open, listening to nothing. The people lie still within their homes, wrapped in the same rhythm that carries the current. Somewhere a jar cracks softly as the air cools inside it. A sound so small, yet in this silence it feels eternal. The temple stands motionless beneath the moon. Its walls, etched with stories, catch just enough light to reveal the carved faces of gods. They gaze outward, falcon, sun, lion, river, sky, each expression calm, unblinking. The single torch at the altar burns low, its flame bending but never dying. The priest sleeps near it, his hand resting on the cold stone floor, his breath shallow but even. Outside, mist begins to form above the river. It gathers first near the shallows, then rises like smoke, curling through the reeds. The mist drifts across the sand, softening the world, turning the sharp edges of huts and boats into shadows. When it reaches the fisherman, it settles around him like a blanket. He does not wake. The river's breath moves over him, gentle and endless. The stars above wheel slowly westward. Time passes without sound. The mist thickens until the water, the land, and the sky are one colorless shape. In that quiet blur, the difference between dream and waking fades away. The fisherman stirs once as if to turn, then grows still again. Far away, thunder mutters beyond the desert. The sound is distant, almost imagined, yet the air changes. The wind returns, light at first, then fuller, brushing through the reeds with a sigh. The mist curls and lifts. The river responds with a ripple, its surface trembling as though stirred by a thought. The first hint of dawn hides behind the dunes, waiting. The fisherman breathes deep in his sleep, his chest rising and falling with the same rhythm as the current beside him. Above him the stars begin to dim. The river murmurs one more word, soft, low, almost human. Then silence again. The night holds for one last heartbeat before surrendering to light. The darkness thins at the edges. The stars grow pale, fading one by one into the wide silence that comes before dawn. A soft grey light seeps over the dunes and touches the tops of the palms. The Nile receives it first, its surface shifting from black to deep blue, then to soft silver. The air feels heavy and cool, full of the scent of mud and water. Every breath carries the weight of 1,000 mornings that came before. The mist lingers low, coiling around the boats, sliding through the reeds. The fisherman opens his eyes slowly. He lies still for a long time, watching the world reveal itself. The river moves beside him, calm and certain. He sits up, brushing sand from his arms, his bones stiff but steady. He looks toward the horizon where the first faint color is gathering, amber bleeding into the gray. The sun is not yet visible, but its promise glows. In the village, the first door opens. A woman steps outside with a jar balanced on her shoulder. Her breath clouds in the cold air. She kneels at the riverbank, filling the jar as quietly as possible, careful not to wake the others. Ripples spread from her hands, distorting the reflection of the sky. When she lifts the jar, the sound of dripping water echoes softly. She stands for a moment watching the current. The same water that feeds her home will, by nightfall, be far downstream, carrying with it the memory of this simple act. A child appears in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. He sits at the threshold, silent, watching the mist. The woman smiles faintly and beckons him inside. Smoke begins to curl from one of the huts. Another morning fire takes its first breath. The smell of burning wood seeps into the air, blending with dew and soil. The old fisherman walks to the edge of the river. He dips his hands into the cold water and splashes it over his face. The shock wakes him fully. He drinks a handful, the taste sharp and alive. The river is low now, but he knows it will rise again soon. He whispers a few words, half greeting, half gratitude, and begins to gather his nets. Across the water the temple stirs. The priest steps into the open courtyard, his robe faintly luminous in the early light. He lifts a bowl filled with grain and scatters a handful toward the river. The grains fall like golden dust upon the surface, sinking one by one. He closes his eyes, whispering, "For the balance between what is taken and what is given." His voice is low, yet the river seems to listen. The sun breaks the horizon at last. Its first light spills across the valley, washing everything in gold. The mist dissolves, revealing the green edges of the fields. Birds rise in sudden flocks, their wings flashing white. The river shines as though made of molten glass. The fisherman steps into his boat. The wood creaks under his weight, familiar and forgiving. He pushes away from the bank, the oar dipping once, twice, carving smooth ripples into the water. Behind him, the village begins to awaken fully. Voices calling, laughter, the rustle of palm fronds. He looks ahead, eyes half closed against the brightening day. The Nile stretches before him, endless and shining. It has no beginning he can remember, no end he will ever see. It simply moves, eternal and kind, carrying with it the breath of every living thing. The fisherman smiles faintly. The river hums in reply. The day begins. The morning settles into warmth. The sun climbs higher, and light spills over every surface. The roofs of the huts, the leaves of palms, the quiet faces of people beginning their work. The Nile gleams like poured metal, wide and slow. Its movement is steady, too vast to notice in moments, yet eternal in its progress. The sound of it fills the air, not loud but constant, a soft murmur that seems to shape the rhythm of all living things. The fisherman rows upriver, his body moving in calm repetition. The oar dips, rises, drips, and returns again. Each motion blends with the next until effort becomes instinct. The boat glides between tall reeds, their tips brushing his shoulders as he passes. The world smells of life, mud, water, grain, smoke, sweat, all softened by the early heat. He can hear the faint hum of the village behind him, voices dissolving into distance. Ahead, only water and sky. Along the eastern bank, farmers bend in their fields. Their shadows stretch long behind them. They work without speaking, their movements slow and even. A boy waves from the edge of the water, and the fisherman lifts a hand in return. The boy's reflection trembles in the current, then disappears as the boat moves on. The river widens. Here the world opens. Beyond the far shore, the desert rises in soft dunes, pale and endless. The line between sand and sky blurs in the haze. The fisherman stops rowing and lets the boat drift. The current takes over, pulling him gently through the shimmer of light. He leans back, the sun warm on his face, and listens. In that quiet, the river speaks again, not in words but in rhythm. It tells of rains far to the south, of mountains that feed its birth, of cities yet unborn that will rise along its banks. The fisherman does not understand the future the river remembers, yet he feels it, the weight of all things that will come. He closes his eyes and lets the sound carry him. By midday the heat thickens. The air quivers above the water. Everything distant bends and shimmers. The fisherman turns the boat toward a shallow inlet shaded by reeds. He ties it to a stone and steps into the cool mud. Tiny crabs scurry away, vanishing into holes. He crouches, washing his arms, feeling the cold water soak his skin. Then he sits beneath a palm, his back against the trunk, his body surrendering to stillness. He eats a small piece of bread, nothing more, and drinks from a skin of water. Each taste feels sacred, as though shared with the river itself. The world is silent, except for the steady lap of waves against the boat. He can see dragonflies hovering above the water, wings flashing blue and green. Their motion is slow, hypnotic. The fisherman closes his eyes again, not to sleep, but to listen. To the hidden world beneath the surface, to the hum of insects, to the pulse of his own breath. Everything moves in the same rhythm, bound by the same invisible thread. He feels himself sink deeper into that stillness, as though the river were not beside him, but inside him. When he opens his eyes, the light has shifted. The shadows grow longer, the air cooler. The current pulls softly at the boat's rope, eager to move again. The fisherman stands, stretches, and unties it. The river welcomes him back with a whisper, and he steps once more into its endless flow. The afternoon drifts toward its quiet turning. The heat begins to fade, though the air still shimmers faintly over the river. A golden haze settles over the valley, softening every edge. The world feels distant, slowed. The Nile glides on unbroken, a long breath drawn by the earth itself. The fisherman's oar moves lazily now, tracing small circles in the water more from habit than need. He passes beneath a cluster of palms leaning out over the river. Their reflections ripple and twist in the current, long and wavering like threads of smoke. Birds dart between them, quick flashes of white and brown against the deepening blue sky. Their cries echo for a moment, then fade into the hum of the wind. Beyond the trees the dunes rise again, rolling and bright, the desert vast and empty. The fisherman lets his boat drift toward the center of the waterway. He rests the oar across his knees and tilts his head back, eyes half closed. The sun hovers above him, no longer fierce but heavy, patient, burning in its own silence. He feels its warmth on his skin, the same warmth that feeds the fields, the reeds, and the long life of the river. He thinks of how it falls everywhere on everything, without choice or judgment. In the distance he can see the faint smoke of the village fires beginning to rise again. The people will soon prepare for the evening meal. He can almost hear them. The dull thud of grain being ground, the laughter of children chasing each other through the dust, the murmur of women speaking softly as they work. These sounds live in him even when he cannot hear them. They are part of the same current that moves through his body, through the boat, through the world. A gentle breeze picks up. It brushes across the river, leaving small ripples that sparkle briefly before vanishing. The fisherman watches them spread outward, endless circles fading into one another. He has seen the same pattern all his life, cause and echo, motion and rest, and still it feels new every time. The river teaches by repetition. Its lessons are never finished. He dips his hand into the water. The surface is warm near the top, cool beneath. He stirs it slowly, watching sunlight break into 1,000 fragments. The fragments drift apart and then come together again, as if drawn by invisible threads. He thinks of the way people live and die along this river, each life a momentary flash of light that disappears, then returns in another form. The thought brings no sadness, only calm. A shadow crosses the water, a heron gliding low, its wings wide and steady. The fisherman follows its flight until it vanishes behind the trees. When he looks down again, the reflection of the sky has deepened. The day is slipping away. The wind grows cooler, and the sound of insects swells in the reeds. He takes up the oar once more. Its wooden handle feels smooth, worn by years of work. With each stroke, he feels the familiar resistance of the current, strong but yielding. The boat turns gently back toward home, the shore glowing faintly ahead. The fisherman rows without hurry. The river leads him as it always has, through light, through shadow, through time. The light bends lower. spilling gold across the river until the water looks like molten glass. The sound of the oar fades, replaced by the hush of the current, moving past the boat's sides. The fisherman slows, letting the flow carry him. Each ripple glows for a moment before dissolving into shadow. The air has cooled, touched by the scent of wet reeds and distant smoke. It is the hour when the world changes color and time seems to hesitate. Along the bank, the fields shimmer faintly. Farmers walk home in small groups, their baskets empty, their voices soft and tired. A woman carries a child asleep against her shoulder, his hand hanging loose in the fading light. The sky deepens from gold to rose, from rose to violet. A single bird cuts across it, wings stretched, a black mark sliding toward the horizon. The fisherman dips his fingers into the water. The surface is warm now, holding the last heat of day. Beneath it, the current is cool, constant, alive. He feels the difference, the meeting of warmth and chill, of light and dark, and thinks how everything the river touches exists between two states. It never ends. It only changes shape. As he nears the village, the sounds of evening return. The low crackle of fires, the soft rhythm of voices. A child's laughter echoes once, then fades. The fisherman smiles without meaning to. He rests the oar across his knees and lets the current guide the boat toward shore. The reflections of the flames shimmer on the water, breaking apart with each small wave. On the bank, the priest stands again near the temple, his robe catching the last light of the sun. He watches the fisherman's boat glide through the golden path that the sun has left behind. For a moment, it looks as if the boat is floating through fire, then the light folds away, and dusk takes its place. The priest raises a hand, a silent acknowledgement. The fisherman answers with a nod, the gesture slow and familiar. The boat touches the shore with a soft scrape. The fisherman steps out, his feet sinking into the cool sand. He ties the rope to its stake and stands for a while, watching the river move past. The current carries small fragments of reed and leaf, each turning once before vanishing into the distance. The sight steadies him. It always does. Behind him the village glows softly. Lamps have been lit in each doorway. The smell of baking bread and roasting grain drifts on the air. A woman's voice hums a tune, low, steady, the same song that fills the nights here generation after generation. The fisherman listens, feeling the sound settle into him like warmth. The sun slips completely beyond the horizon. The first stars appear, faint at first, then clear, their reflections trembling in the water. The fisherman sits beside his boat, resting his elbows on his knees. The river glows under the sky's slow darkening. He knows this hour, the in-between, the quiet bridge from day to night, better than any other. It is the hour the world remembers itself. The priest's final bell rings from the temple. Its tone carries far across the water, a single pure sound that seems to hang in the air long after it fades. The fisherman closes his eyes. The river moves beside him, unending, patient, alive. The wind brushes his hair, and the first whisper of night settles over the land. The night settles softly, as if poured from the sky. The last streaks of sunlight melt into the horizon, and the world exhales in silence. The Nile turns dark again, no longer gold but obsidian, its surface carrying the reflections of lamps and stars in 1,000 trembling lines. The air is cool and full of scent, smoke, grain, damp earth, the faint sweetness of flowering reeds. The fisherman sits near his boat, watching the village slowly disappear into shadow. One by one, the lights in the huts dim until only a few remain. He can hear faint laughter, the murmur of conversation, the crackle of fire. Then as the hours pass, even those sounds fade. The night begins to weave its own music, crickets, frogs, the hush of the river brushing against stone. He lies back on the sand, hands folded over his chest. Above him, the stars burn brighter than before. Some flicker. Others remain still like frozen sparks. He knows their patterns by heart. The hunter, the bird, the river of heaven that mirrors the Nile itself. The same constellations have watched over this valley since before words were carved into stone. They will keep watching long after he is gone. Across the water, the temple stands wrapped in silver light. The priest is still awake. He walks slowly along the outer wall, touching each pillar as he passes. He pauses at the last torch, lifting it to shield it from the wind. For a moment the flame leans toward the river, and its reflection flares. A narrow road of gold stretching over the black water. The priest whispers a few lines of prayer, words so old they no longer belong to any living tongue. Then he lowers the torch, places it by the altar, and kneels. The light trembles but does not die. A cool breeze moves through the valley. It glides over the river, through the reeds, over the huts, into the fields. The palms sway gently, their leaves whispering in tones soft as breath. The fisherman listens to it all. He feels the weight of the day slide away, replaced by the simple pulse of the night. Every sound, every shadow belongs to the same rhythm. He closes his eyes, but his thoughts do not wander far. They drift only to the water, to its endless giving, its patience, its memory. He thinks of the river as a living god, not one of stone or fire, but of movement and time. It never demands, never judges, yet it endures. Its strength is gentleness, its wisdom, silence. A fish leaps once, breaking the surface with a soft splash. The ripples widen, catching the starlight, then fade. The fisherman smiles faintly in the dark. He knows the river will always return to stillness. The air cools further, brushing his face, carrying the smell of distant rain. Somewhere upstream, storms may be gathering. Tomorrow or the next day the water will rise again, bringing new life to the soil. The people will work, eat, rest, and begin again. Everything will continue as it always has. The fisherman's breath slows. The sound of the river fills the space where thoughts might be. The world contracts to this, the rhythm of his breathing, the whisper of the current, the pulse of the earth beneath him. Above, the stars turn their endless circles. He does not notice when sleep comes. It arrives like the tide, without warning or sound. The river moves beside him, dark and shining, cradling the dreams of all who live by its edge. Egypt sleeps. The water keeps its vigil, ancient and endless. The night settles softly, as if poured from the sky. The last streaks of sunlight melt into the horizon, and the world exhales in silence. The Nile turns dark again. No longer gold, but obsidian, its surface carrying the reflections of lamps and stars in 1,000 trembling lines. The air is cool and full of scent, smoke, grain, damp earth, the faint sweetness of flowering reeds. The fisherman sits near his boat, watching the village slowly disappear into shadow. One by one the lights in the huts dim until only a few remain. He can hear faint laughter, the murmur of conversation, the crackle of fire. Then, as the hours pass, even those sounds fade. The night begins to weave its own music, crickets, frogs, the hush of the river brushing against stone. He lies back on the sand, hands folded over his chest. Above him the stars burn brighter than before. Some flicker. Others remain still like frozen sparks. He knows their patterns by heart. The hunter, the bird, the river of heaven that mirrors the Nile itself. The same constellations have watched over this valley since before words were carved into stone. They will keep watching long after he is gone. Across the water the temple stands wrapped in silver light. The priest is still awake. He walks slowly along the outer wall, touching each pillar as he passes. He pauses at the last torch, lifting it to shield it from the wind. For a moment, the flame leans toward the river, and its reflection flares, a narrow road of gold stretching over the black water. The priest whispers a few lines of prayer, words so old they no longer belong to any living tongue. Then he lowers the torch, places it by the altar, and kneels. The light trembles, but does not die. A cool breeze moves through the valley. It glides over the river, through the reeds, over the huts, into the fields. The palms sway gently, their leaves whispering in tones soft as breath. The fisherman listens to it all. He feels the weight of the day slide away, replaced by the simple pulse of the night. Every sound, every shadow belongs to the same rhythm. He closes his eyes, but his thoughts do not wander far. They drift only to the water, to its endless giving, its patience, its memory. He thinks of the river as a living god, not one of stone or fire, but of movement and time. It never demands, never judges, yet it endures. Its strength is gentleness, its wisdom silence. A fish leaps once, breaking the surface with a soft splash. The ripples widen, catching the starlight, then fade. The fisherman smiles faintly in the dark. He knows the river will always return to stillness. The air cools further, brushing his face, carrying the smell of distant rain. Somewhere upstream, storms may be gathering. Tomorrow, or the next day, the water will rise again, bringing new life to the soil. The people will work, eat, rest, and begin again. Everything will continue as it always has. The fisherman's breath slows. The sound of the river fills the space where thoughts might be. The world contracts to this, the rhythm of his breathing, the whisper of the current, the pulse of the earth beneath him. Above, the stars turn their endless circles. He does not notice when sleep comes. It arrives like the tide, without warning or sound. The river moves beside him, dark and shining, cradling the dreams of all who live by its edge. Egypt sleeps. The water keeps its vigil, ancient and endless. The dawn spreads wide and pale, painting the sky with a soft golden haze. The river glows like metal beneath the rising sun, its slow movement catching every flicker of light. The mist lifts from the water and drifts over the banks, dissolving among the huts. The people stir, their voices low at first, then growing as the village wakes once more. The sound of life returns. The clatter of jars, the crackle of rekindled fires, the low hum of human breath meeting the calm pulse of the river. The fisherman sits quietly beside his boat, his eyes half closed. The chill of the night still lingers in the air, but the sun warms his skin. He breathes deeply, filling his chest with the scent of silt and smoke. His body feels heavy, but his mind is clear, shaped by the rhythm of water and wind. He has seen this morning countless times, yet each one feels new, as though the world has been remade in silence. Children run along the shore, their laughter skipping over the ripples. They chase one another, their bare feet scattering the sand. A woman kneels by the water, washing a piece of cloth the color of clay and dust. Her hands move gently, her reflection trembling on the surface. The river gives her back her image in fragments, light and shadow woven together. The priest appears from the temple, carrying a small jar of oil. He stops by the water's edge, pouring a few drops into the current. The oil spreads in thin rainbow circles, gliding downstream. He bows his head and murmurs a prayer that belongs to no one. Words carried down through generations until their meaning has faded into music. The fisherman watches but does not speak. The prayer feels unnecessary. The river already knows. Above them, the sky clears to a perfect blue. The air hums with life. Birds, insects, the soft rustle of reeds. The fields beyond the village shimmer green and gold, touched by light. A faint wind brushes the surface of the Nile, scattering the reflections of clouds. Every sound seems balanced by its opposite. Motion by stillness, voice by silence. The fisherman steps into his boat once more. The wood creaks under his weight, the same familiar sound that has followed him every day of his life. He unties the rope, pushes gently, and lets the current take him. The river feels stronger today, its pull firm but kind. The water laps against the sides, steady and patient. He dips his oar and begins to move, his strokes slow and sure. Behind him the village grows smaller, its fires faint, its voices distant. Ahead, the horizon shimmers where river meets sky. The fisherman's reflection travels beside him, a dark shadow gliding across the bright water. He watches it flicker and stretch, as though the river were painting him anew with every movement. He does not wonder where he is going. The Nile decides that for him, as it does for all who live within its reach. The current knows the shape of every bend, the depth of every hidden pool. It has carried kings and farmers, children and wanderers, ashes and seeds. It remembers them all but keeps none. The fisherman rows until the village is only a memory behind him. The river widens, opening into the vastness of light. He feels the pull of time, of distance, of everything that came before and everything that will come after. He sets down the oar, closes his eyes, and lets the boat drift. The sun climbs higher, the water brightens, and the air shimmers with the hum of life. The fisherman breathes once deeply and smiles. The river moves on, eternal, endless, carrying all things, holding nothing. The morning grows full, the sun burning higher above the valley. The air hums with heat already, though the day is still young. The river broadens, turning wide and calm, its surface dappled with light that dances and fades like memory. Every shimmer feels alive, as though the Nile itself is breathing in time with the world. The fisherman drifts in silence, his boat moving without effort, the current guiding him deeper into the day. Along the banks, life awakens in a rhythm older than thought. Farmers step into the wet fields, their feet sinking into cool mud. They move slowly, their bodies bent, their shadows stretched across the bright water. Voices rise in short calls and low laughter, the sounds of a people who know both labor and peace. Each movement is deliberate, patient, a ritual as certain as the sunrise. A heron stands still at the edge of the river, its neck long and curved, its reflection perfect in the shallows. When it moves, it does so without sound, lifting into the air with the grace of wind itself. The fisherman watches it rise, his eyes following the white wings until they vanish into light. He has seen that motion thousands of times, yet it never loses its calm. In it, he recognizes the way of the river, quiet power, effortless endurance. He dips his hand into the water. The surface is warm now, but the depth remains cold. He lets his fingers trail, feeling the soft current slide between them, gentle as breath. The water hums faintly, carrying the echoes of unseen places, mountains, rains, the distant lands from which it comes. The fisherman imagines he can hear them all, the faraway voices of stones and storms that feed this river of life. In the distance, he can see smoke rising from another village, a small gray thread twisting into the blue. Somewhere, people he will never meet are baking bread, mending nets, singing songs he does not know. The thought comforts him. The river connects them all, even in their distance. They live by the same current, drink the same flow, breathe the same air that travels down this endless path. He begins to row again, slowly, more to keep rhythm than to move. Each stroke of the oar cuts a clear line across the shining water. Behind him, the ripples spread outward in circles, merging, fading, disappearing. Nothing is wasted. The water always returns to calm. Overhead, the sky deepens into a color so pure it almost hums. The light burns bright on the desert's edge, where the dunes rise and fall like sleeping giants. The air above them trembles. Somewhere far away, a hawk circles, its wings catching flashes of gold. The fisherman watches until it becomes only a dot, a shadow swallowed by the sky. He feels the pull of the current under his boat, a slow insistence, a reminder of direction. The Nile never stops. It carries forward, even when it seems still. He thinks of the people behind him, their laughter, their fires, their rest. He thinks of those ahead, waiting for the river's gift. Every soul along its length is bound by this same motion, this same endless giving. The wind rises a little, stirring the surface into 1,000 glittering points. The fisherman pauses, his hand resting on the oar, and closes his eyes. The warmth of the sun seeps into his skin. The hum of the river settles in his chest. Time blurs. The sound of the water replaces thought. When he opens his eyes again, the world is vast and bright. The horizon shimmers where the sky meets the sand, and the river runs like a line of light through it all. He smiles faintly. The day is only beginning, yet it feels as though it has always been this way. An unbroken circle of sunlight, current, and breath. The Nile carries him onward, eternal and silent, as the morning slips gently toward noon. The sun drifts west, sliding toward the horizon, one slow heartbeat at a time. The long day folds itself back into silence. Shadows stretch across the river, deep and soft, touching the banks where reeds sway in the evening wind. The air cools again. Its heat dissolves into the rhythm of insects and the distant cry of birds returning to their nests. The Nile glows one final time, liquid gold turning to bronze, then to glass, then to shadow. The fisherman guides his boat back toward the familiar curve of the shore. Each stroke of the oar is slow and deliberate, a language spoken between man and river. The water clings to the blade, shining in the dimming light. Behind him, the trail of ripples widens, spreading outward until it disappears into calm. When he reaches the bank, he steps out barefoot, feeling the cool mud press beneath his feet. He pulls the boat half onto the sand and lets it rest. Around him the world exhales. The sound of work is gone. The fields lie quiet, dark green against the deepening sky. The voices of the villagers are faint. Soft laughter, the clink of clay bowls, the murmur of evening talk. Smoke rises from a dozen small fires, their flames hidden now but their scent strong. Roasted grain, burning wood, the faint sweetness of cooked fruit. The fisherman stands still for a moment, watching the smoke blend into the color of dusk. The first stars appear above the water, trembling faintly in the ripple of the current. He looks at them as he always does, recognizing each one. He feels the years in his body, the weight of them, but not as burden. Each day has flowed into the next, each sunrise following another as steady as the river's song. Time, he knows, is not a thing to measure, but a current to drift within. The priest emerges once more from the temple, his torch held high. He walks to the river's edge, where the reflection of the flame ripples like a path of fire. He nods to the fisherman. The gesture needs no words. It is acknowledgement, not farewell. Two men held within the same breath of water and sky. The priest lowers the torch, setting it upright in the sand. The fire stands between them, motionless in the windless air. The fisherman sits beside his boat, the sand warm beneath him, the air cooling on his skin. He listens, the frogs, the wind, the faint creak of wood as the river pulls at the boat's rope. All of it is part of one sound, the same unending hymn that has filled this valley since the first dawn. He closes his eyes and breathes deeply. The scent of water and earth fills him, grounding him in the present, anchoring him in something older than thought. The last light fades from the west. The stars bloom fully now, vast and clear. Their reflections drift on the Nile until sky and river become one. The fisherman's heart slows. His breath deepens. The world is still. The gods of stone sleep in their temples. The people rest. The water moves on, carrying everything, holding nothing. He whispers a single word to the river, not prayer, not farewell, only thanks, and lies back on the sand. The current hums its low, eternal song beside him. The same song that has guided every hand and heart since the first people settled here. It speaks without sound. You are part of this. You always were. The night folds over him. The stars shimmer in the dark mirror of the water. Somewhere far away, thunder murmurs, soft and kind, promising rain that will fall in some future season. The Nile flows on, carrying light, memory, and sleep together. The fisherman closes his eyes. The river keeps watch. Egypt dreams.